Great. Thank you, Ms. Rich. Go ahead, Al. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to welcome members to the February 3rd meeting of the board. We've got a fair amount of business today, but before we can do any of that, we have to, because we are having a telephonic meeting and because it is an exception to the rule, what we need to do is to read into the record a specific legal notices, several legal notices. And we have with us today Sarah Richards, who is now with the legal department, who will read those notices.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all. On March 7th, 2020, Governor Cuomo issued a disaster emergency in the state of New York due to the outbreak of COVID-19. On March 12th, 2020, the governor then issued Executive Order 202.1, which suspends the provisions of the Open Meetings Law to the extent necessary to permit a public body to meet and take authorized actions without permitting public in-person access to those meetings. The executive order also authorizes meetings to be held remotely by conference call or similar service, provided the public has the ability to view or listen to such proceedings, and the proceedings are recorded and then later transcribed. Executive Order 202.1 was most recently extended by Executive Order 202.92 and is currently in effect until February 26, 2021. Accordingly, today's regular meeting of the DASNY board is being conducted telephonically and by video conference. Notice of today's meeting has been posted prominently on DASNY's public website and in the standard publicly accessible locations. An audio and video recording of today's meeting will be accessible from DASNY's website not later than 2 business days after the close of the meeting, and today's proceedings will be transcribed and posted as soon thereafter as is reasonable and practicable under the circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Mr. President.
Great. Thank you so much. What I will do very quickly is let everyone know who is on the call, and I've got a couple of special introductions. We do have a full board member, so in no particular order other than I see you on the screen. We've got Deb Frazier, Jerry Romsky, Sarah Richards, Janice McKinney, Stan Reed, Matt Bergen, Portia Lee, Brendan, I blanked your last name, Steve Winters Bono, Brendan's our legal department, Kathy Ebert, Antoinette Tomlin, Diane Folletti, Ricardo Solomon, Caroline Griffin, Paul Koopman, Dina Amodio. How about that? Dina Amodio. I got it right this time. Laura St. James, Michael Johnson, Beryl Snyder, John Johnson, John Gardner, Joan Sullivan, Al Carney, Kim Ellis, Steve Kozer, Jeff Gordon, Chris Reitzel, Tracy Riley, Phyllis Morris, Sonny Williams, Seth Bryant, Steve Currow, Dilshota, so far from pronouncing your name wrong, Kerbonava, and Adrian. But I've got a couple special guests, Mr. Chairman. On the Monday, we were talking with the chairman about our resolution, the first resolution, and there are several treasurers who are assistant treasurers by function, but most of the board members have not met them. And so Al said in a future board meeting, well, to introduce the folks. So this is future. So here we go.
All right. All right.
And Antoinette Tomlin. Antoinette.
Good morning, Ruben. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. My name is Antoinette Tomlin. I am a senior financial analyst in DASNY's financial management unit. We are responsible for managing DASNY's portion of New York State debt. Since I started over 24 years ago, DASNY has issued over $134 billion in bond issues. Our unit reports on DASNY's outstanding bond portfolio for the annual audit. We also maintain updated reports on DASNY's outstanding bonds for all of our clients, including New York State Division of the Budget, Office of the New York State Comptroller, the public, and our DASNY colleagues. Thank you.
Antoinette. Thank you very much. Laura St. James.
Good morning, everyone. I've been with DASNY for 13 years. I'm currently a senior financial analyst in the debt side of the financial management unit. I've been in that position for almost 6 years. And along with Tanette and others in our group, I work on bond administration and issuing new debt for our clients.
Thank you, Laura. Steve Winters Bona.
Good morning, Ruben. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Winters Bona, as Ruben said. I have had the pleasure to work with Tanette, Laura, Stan, and everyone else here at the Authority for just about 21 years. They are a wonderful group of professionals, and I am the Assistant Director of Financial Management Debt. And they and I work on the administration of the bonds, including billing the debt service, doing the arbitrage calculations, and basically once Portia's group sells the bonds, we are married to our clients for at least 30 years, sometimes longer. That's it. Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. Stan Reed, Stanley J. Reed.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Stanley Reed, and I currently serve as the Assistant Director of the Investments Unit and as an Assistant Treasurer. I was hired in January of 2000 in the Financial Management Unit and worked within that unit for about a year and a half. I then applied for a position in the Investments Unit and have worked in that unit for the last 19 and a half years, giving me a total of 21 years of service with DASNY.
Wow.
And I'm currently being recognized for my 20-year milestone. The Investments Unit main function is to direct the investments and liquidation of funds in accordance with the investment policy and guidelines, the underlying bond resolutions. We also move, coordinate, and disperse funds with our corporate banking partner and the bond trustees. Thank you again.
Great. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, everybody. So these are assistant treasurers who are by function part of the resolution that's coming up next. So I wanted to have a chance to introduce those to the board members and appreciate you all being here today. So Mr. Chairman, it is back to you.
And if
Well,
I may pop in, excuse me for the interruption. I do just want to make sure that we admit folks from the waiting room that are there. But first, I'd like to just find out who they are. We have an Adam Giuliano. Would that be a bond counsel? Is anybody familiar with that person? Okay, so we will let him in and ask him to identify himself. And then with Deb's help, we'll go through the others. Mr. Giuliano, have you joined the meeting? We just admitted someone to the meeting name that comes through as Adam Giuliano. Mr.
Adam?
Giuliano, or who just
Yes.
identify yourself?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I understood this was a public meeting. So,
That's why, yeah, we're doing Zoom. We always have everybody
Okay.
identify themselves. So glad
yes,
to have
that
you
is
here.
correct.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We just need to have the roll so that we do have accurate attendance. So thank you for doing that. And then we also had somebody join that's identified on our list with the last name Benson. Is that person with us today?
Yes, that's correct. Stephen Benson. Thank you.
Morning, Steve.
Okay, and Deb Fasser, is there anyone else that I missed who has joined our meeting today or who has not otherwise been introduced by the president or myself?
No, I think you've got everybody, Sarah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, for that.
Thank you both very much. It's Al Carney. First of all, Mr. Giuliano and Mr. Benson, thank you for joining us today. It's good to have you with us. And to Mr. Reed, Ms. St. James, Ms. Tomlin, and Mr. Winters Bona, I'm so pleased that you all have taken the time to be with us and that you have told us a bit about what you do. We see the assistant secretaries for any number of reasons, but we don't often get to see the assistant treasurers. It's good to have seen your faces now and to know what you do. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we can now begin the meeting.
Sir.
All right. the first order of business is the election of officers. It is the first resolution of many in your book. And it is made necessary because Sarah Potter Richards, if the resolution is approved, will be elected an assistant secretary. Just by way of background, Sarah was with the legal staff, left the legal staff to take an assignment inside of DASNY, a terrific assignment, and is now rejoined in a new job, new capacity. Sarah, we are pleased to have you on this list. Are there any questions from the members about any of the other officers? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution?
Not at all. Jerry.
Thank you.
Second,
And the second was?
Joan.
Joan, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll do this the way I've been doing it. Are there any objections to the approval of the resolution? Hearing none, are there any abstentions to the approval of the resolution? Hearing none, the motion is deemed approved unanimously. The resolution is passed. Our second order of business is something called a delegation of authority. It is behind tab 2. You've all had a chance to read the resolution, so you understand why we have it, why it's there. Are there any questions about it? Ricardo is with us. Hearing no questions, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution?
Make the
I
motion,
will
Joan.
move. I'll second it, Beryl.
Joan, Beryl, thank you both in that order. Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the approval of the resolution? Hearing none, are there any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is deemed approved unanimously. The resolution is passed. The third order of business, third item, is a transcript of the meeting of 9 December. You've all had a chance to read it. It's really very interesting, these transcripts, because they contain a great deal of information. And I actually enjoy reading them because I talk a lot, so I get to see my name. I'm sorry. You've all had a chance to read the transcript. Are there any corrections? Hearing none. May I have a motion, please, to approve it?
You got it, Al.
Motion.
Thank you, Jerry. And Joan, is that you? Thank you.
That was me, Beryl, but that either way.
Thank you very much. Forgive me. Are there any objections to the approval motion? Hearing none, are there any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is deemed approved unanimously. The resolution is approved. The fourth order of business is the Finance Committee report. We have with us on screen today, Chairman Romsky. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Finance met yesterday by way of Zoom after adopting the meeting minutes from the last Finance Committee meeting, which was in November of 2020. We advanced to discuss the PIT sales bond financing that's on today's agenda. After some discussion, we voted to recommend that be adopted at today's full board meeting. We then advanced to the BOCES St. Lawrence County offering, and again, we voted unanimously to recommend approval of that offering at today's full board meeting. And unless anyone has any questions or concerns, that concludes my report, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Are there any questions for Jerry? Hearing none, we'll move on to the President's presentation of single approval financings. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Behind tab 5 is the state personal income tax / sales tax revenue bond program transaction summary. We have Matt Bergen of DASNY, Chris Reitzel of Nixon Peabody, and Sonny Williams of Bryant Rubino, who will present this transaction.
Chris, Sonny, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chairman Carney. Pleasure.
No, the pleasure's ours, Sonny. The pleasure's ours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. The board is being asked to authorize the issuance of multiple series of tax-exempt and or taxable fixed and or variable rate bonds issued at one or more times with a term of 30 years in an amount not to exceed $2.75 billion. The authorization provides that this could be done under either the sales tax revenue bond program and or the personal income tax revenue bond program, although at this time, the current plan is to issue under the personal income tax revenue bond program. The bonds are being issued for new money and refunding purposes, and the new money portion is estimated at approximately $1.2 billion and includes capital projects for OMH, OPWDD, and OASIS, capital projects for the upstate community colleges, capital projects for the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, funding for various SUNY 2020 challenge grants, funding for various capital projects for the Office of General Services, funding for Lake Ontario flooding and erosion projects, funding for various arts and cultural projects, funding for various capital projects under the Consolidated Local Street and Highway Improvement Program, otherwise known as CHIPS, funding for various environmental initiatives, funding for state and municipal facilities grants, otherwise known as SAM grants, funding for economic development projects and or grants, funding for healthcare grants, and funding for various education programs. And I did want to make note that the division of the budget provides these programmatic budgets. And as much of this is reimbursement, the agencies certify that the dollars have been spent appropriately. In addition to the new money, this authorization also looks to cover the refunding of certain bonds issued under various state-supported debt programs in the amount of approximately $1.49 billion. Also, as noted in the staff report, the fiscal year 2021 enacted budget suspended the Debt Reform Act of 2000 for fiscal year 2021 issuances, including this one, as part of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Any borrowings that are initiated in fiscal year 21 are not limited to capital purposes and are not counted towards the statutory caps on debt outstanding and debt service. When looking at the security provisions for the personal income tax revenue bond program, the bonds will be paid by the semi-annual payments made pursuant to the financing agreement between DASNY and the state. The bonds are secured by a set aside of 50% of personal income tax revenues collected pursuant to statute and 50% of the receipts of the employer compensation expense tax, with both taxes deposited in the revenue bond tax fund. Also to note, the debt service coverage ratio on all outstanding state personal income tax bonds was 6.8 times as of March 31st, 2020, and for March 31st, 2021, the debt service coverage ratio is projected to be 6.0 times. And finally, the proposed bonds are expected to be rated AA2, AA+, and AA+. And Mr. Chairman, I would now like to give the presentation over to Chris Reitzel and Sonny Williams.
Chris, I said hello to Sonny. I didn't see you. You didn't appear on the screen. It's good to have you.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some faces these days. It's a treat. Before you for consideration is the adoption of two supplemental resolutions, one under the Personal Income Tax Revenue Bond Program, the other the State Sales Tax Revenue Bond Program. Each supplemental resolution authorizes individually and in the aggregate the issuance of up to $2.75 billion of 2021 bonds. In order to provide maximum flexibility, it is proposed that the board authorize the issuance of bonds under both the general purpose PIT bond resolution and the sales tax bond resolution. The 2021 bonds are expected to be used to finance the projects identified in our board letter and that Matt just went through, but may be used for any authorized purpose. In addition, the 2021 bonds are expected to refund certain outstanding state-supported bonds. Each supplemental resolution permits 2021 bonds to be issued in one or more series or sub-series at one or more times and to be sold on a negotiated or through competitive bidding. In addition, all or a portion of the 2021 bonds may be issued as tax-exempt bonds and/or federally taxable bonds. It is currently expected that the 2021 bonds will be issued under the PIP program as fixed rate, tax exempt, and federally taxable bonds and sold on a negotiated basis with Morgan Stanley serving as lead underwriter. Each supplemental resolution provides for an authorized officer of the authority to execute and deliver one or more supplements to the related financing agreement to reflect any additional issuance under that program. In addition, each supplemental resolution delegates to various officers of the authority the power to make the determinations described in our board letter and to do all things necessary or convenient in connection with the sale and issuance of the 2021 bonds. I'm going to turn it over to Sani to discuss the programs in a little more detail.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks. I'm sorry. Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you all again. As Chris said, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the personal income tax revenue bond program and the state sales tax revenue bond program. So with regards to the personal income tax revenue bond program, Article 5C of the state finance law authorizes the authority and certain other authorized issuers to issue PIT bonds for any authorized purpose. That was stated earlier. I apologize for any repetition. But all PIT bonds issued under the general purpose PIT bond resolution are special obligations of the authority secured by payments to be received by the authority under the PIT financing agreement with DOB. The PIT financing agreement obligates the state to pay debt service on outstanding PIT bonds, notes, and other obligations. Those payments are made from amounts available in the Revenue Bond Tax Fund established by the state finance law and are subject to annual appropriation. The Revenue Bond Tax Fund receives a statutorily allocated portion of the state's personal income tax receipts and a statutorily allocated portion of the employer compensation expense program receipts. With regards to the sales tax program, Article 5F of the New York State Finance Law authorizes the authority and certain other authorized issuers to issue state sales tax bonds for any of the purposes for which state-supported debt may or has been issued. All sales tax bonds issued under the sales tax bond resolution are special obligations of the authority secured by payments to be received by the authority under the sales tax financing agreement with DOB. The sales tax financing agreement obligates the state to pay debt service on all outstanding sales tax bonds issued under the sales tax bond resolution. Those payments are made from amounts available in the sales tax revenue bond tax fund established by the state finance law, subject to appropriation. The sales tax revenue bond fund, the sales tax revenue bond tax fund, say that 10 times fast, receives a statutorily allocated percentage of revenues collected from the state sales and compensating use taxes. And that concludes our formal presentation, but we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sonny. Do the members have questions for Sonny or for Chris or for Matt?
Al?
Yes, Jerry.
I had a quick question. After yesterday's meeting, I got one of these newsletters from the controller's office.
Yep.
I guess I'm on their site, and there was a report that the state sales tax revenues were down 10% compared from 19 to 20. Generally not blaming, but pointing out the fact that sales of various commodities in New York City has gone down dramatically and had an impact. I don't think that has an impact on anything, but since it came up sort of after finance, I just thought I would just make sure that was addressed, and maybe Joan has something else on it more than I, but I just thought it would be appropriate to mention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jerry.
Matt, do you want to just say something about the sales tax versus personal income tax, please?
Yeah,
Well,
let me just bring up.
Wait. The sales tax first. I'd love, Matt, for you to address what Jerry's raised. I don't think this poses any issues or any even concerns for the proposal on the table now. I don't think that article yesterday will affect this at all. But I'm just curious to know is it the Department of the Budget that does the analysis to make sure that the revenues are sufficient for us to continue to issue PIT and sales tax bonds?
Matt, go
That's
ahead.
correct. That's correct. That's correct. And just to address Jerry's question, fiscal year 2020, the resulting debt service coverage ratio for sales tax was 2.7 times. The most recent projection for March 31st, 2021 is a coverage ratio of 2.4 times. So that does encapsulate the decrease in the projected sales tax receipts.
Okay. Got it.
Again, I didn't think it was of impact. I just thought it just should be mentioned, Mr. Chair, just because it seems significant.
I had a similar reaction as Jerry. We're seeing various reports in the media about the deterioration of the state's finances generally, and I would ask, we periodically get a report from the director of the budget. I would love to have one of those just to update us on the, where we stand vis-a-vis the last time we heard from him.
John, thank you for the question.
I also have kind of a related question. In the past, there have been various mixes between personal income tax and sales tax, where the revenue comes from. So are we anticipating a significant decline in the personal income tax aspect of these as well? And is there our ratings are still the same on the budget? Is that correct? And it would seem to me that, do we have any expectations on people's appetite to buy it?
I mean, the market is very accepting of the PIT credit. We certainly had a very successful competitive sale in the fall. I would assume and certainly say that the market is going to be very accepting of this upcoming bond sale.
And I would say two things. One is on the PIT coverage, it is higher than the sales tax coverage.
Right.
So given how this security structure works, these bonds maintain their rating and continue to have a very strong market. The second thing is just from a market perspective, and I'm sure Portia and Matt will get into this later, there's been a great receptivity to tax exempt bonds generally in the market, and certainly higher rated credits specifically, and narrowing down even more. Not only did our last PIT competitive deal go well, but there have been several New York City transactions since then that have also gone well. So we have no question there's plenty of demand in the marketplace for these bonds.
It's terrific. Terrific. I'd like to join John Gardner in his request that we receive periodic reports from the Department of the Budget as we look at declining sales tax revenues, and as we may be looking at declining personal income tax revenues. Don't know that that's the case, but it's certainly been suggested in the press. I don't expect that either of those will affect, given the coverage ratios that exist now and the projected coverage ratios, as Matt has just emphasized. I don't think that will affect where we are now, and it certainly won't affect any of the bonds we've already issued. But it would be great to know that we're going to get that periodic report. It's a great idea, John. Thank you. And I think we get it. I think you all bring us a periodic report from budget, but I'd like to make sure that the sales tax revenues and the personal income tax revenues are emphasized. I saw the article that Jerry mentioned, and it does raise some concerns.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to commit any of our non-DASNY staff people in the state to do anything. However, we will request from DOB that at our March 31st board meeting, not the next one, the March 31st board meeting, we have some presentation that includes both the projections for the state, but also that time we should have more information on the state's budget and
Okay.
what the legislature and the governor have agreed to. And so that's probably the most informative time. March 3rd may be a little early to get those updates on kind of where we are from a budget perspective. So let's just plan before we request your approval for the DASNY budget in March 31st. We will create some type of report, hopefully with some folks from DOB involved, that will give us an update on both the state's revenue projections as well as the summary of kind of the budget. I think that would be helpful for this board.
I think that's right, Ruben. And nobody's going to hold you to the in-March meeting either. Whenever you believe that we've got sufficient information to present to the board, do it then. It's fine. If it's April, it's okay. I had a question from Matt. I think, Matt, I think you actually answered this question in the Finance Committee meeting yesterday. And the question's a simple one. The project budgets, whether they be for reimbursement or for the budgets for the 14 and 15 matters, whether they be for reimbursement or specific projects, are projections. If something goes over the projected budget, I assume that means that another project or a planned reimbursement will somehow have to be less than the projected budget, and that the budget reviews that and makes those decisions. Is that correct?
That could happen, all but the CHIPS, the Consolidated Local Street and Highway Improvement Program, are reimbursements. So if your question is specific to CHIPS, if the projected amount is less, they could either issue less, or as our authorization provides for any authorized purpose, we could pick up an additional purpose. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. And I think you answered it in the Finance Committee meeting yesterday. I wasn't sure. And I thought it would be good to get that into this record today. Are there any other questions for Matt or for Chris or for Sonny? Hearing done, may I have a motion, please, to approve the financing?
So moved. It's Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Beryl.
Beryl, thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion as offered? Hearing none, are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, the motion is deemed passed unanimously and the financing is approved. Mr. President.
And at this point, I'm sorry, this is Sarah Richards again. I'm sorry to butt in. We have had another individual join us in the waiting room. So if we could pause a moment, we'll have Deb Fasser let them in and ask that individual to identify themselves.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hello, we have a person by the name of Youssef has joined our meeting. If you could please identify yourself for the record, as we do need to have that since we are participating in a Zoom meeting today. Mr. Youssef? Would the person who just joined the meeting from the waiting room just please identify themselves for purposes of the record?
It looks like they might still be connecting.
I'm sorry, somebody said something.
Yes, this is Janice. I was just saying it looks like he's still connecting to his audio, so he may not be able to speak yet.
I see.
Oh, I don't see that on my screen, so thank you for that information.
No problem. You're welcome.
Dude.
Deb, can you tell if
That was impressive.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, they're still trying to connect.
Very
Let's
nice,
move
Janice.
on. Let's move on to this
It's my part.
next item, and once they connect, we'll
You have to teach me how to do that. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mr. President, we're at tab 6.
We are at tab 6, yes, sir. So behind tab 6 is the Master BOCES Program Lease Revenue Bonds, St. Lawrence Lewis issue, excuse me. Transaction summary with Steve Kozier of DASNY and Seth Bryant of Bryant Rubino presenting. Steve and Seth.
Thank you, Ruben, and good morning, all. Nice to see you all.
Hey, Steve.
Good morning. So here, staff is requesting the board to adopt the necessary documents for bond financing in an amount not to exceed $4.2 million on behalf of St. Lawrence Lewis County's BOCES to current refund the St. Lawrence Lewis County's BOCES Series 2011 bonds. The ability to create a BOCES, or Board of Cooperative Educational Services, was established in 1948 and was designed to enable school districts to combine their resources to provide services that otherwise would have been uneconomical, inefficient, or unavailable. St. Lawrence Lewis County BOCES was established in 1970 and provides shared services to 18 component school districts in St. Lawrence and Lewis counties that together serve approximately 20,000 students. The component districts cover over 2,500 square miles, and the BOCES administration offices are located in the village of Canton. DASNY has issued 5 series of bonds on behalf of this BOCES, totaling approximately $63.8 million. As of December 31st, 2020, 4 series of bonds totaling approximately $47.4 million remain outstanding. These are the BOCES Series 2011, Series 2015, Series 2020A, and Series 2020B bonds. BOCES are funded by payments made to them by the component school districts based on their allocable share of program services and administrative and facilities expenses. The component school districts pay for these expenses through real property tax levies. In addition, the state has made appropriations to the BOCES program each year since 1949 to partially offset these expenses. The amount of state aid apportioned to St. Lawrence Lewis County's BOCES is available to be applied to pay the DASNY rentals or debt service. The refunding is anticipated to be financed through a fixed rate, tax exempt negotiated bond sale. The refunding of the Series 2011 bonds is estimated to result in net present value savings of approximately $486,000, or 11.6% of the bonds being refunded. The bonds are expected to be rated AA3 by Moody's, and the bonds will be secured by annual rental payments to be made pursuant to a lease agreement with St. Lawrence Lewis County's BOCES, a direct intercept for the state comptroller of any state aid due to St. Lawrence Lewis County's BOCES for rental payments on the DASNY lease agreement, a pledge of public funds apportioned by the state due to St. Lawrence Lewis County's BOCES in an amount sufficient to pay such rental payments, subordinate to pledges granted in connection with other outstanding DASNY St. Lawrence Lewis County's BOCES bonds, a 1/2 year debt service reserve fund or reserve fund facility, and bond insurance may be considered depending on its availability and economic efficiency. I'll now turn it over to Seth to provide an overview of the financing documents.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President. Today, the members of DASNY are being asked to consider, and in the board's discretion, to adopt a series resolution for up to $4.2 million in the aggregate of Master BOCES Program Lease Refunding Revenue Bonds, St. Lawrence Lewis Issue Series 2021, which, if adopted, would be issued on behalf of the Board of Cooperative Educational Services for the sole supervisory district of St. Lawrence Lewis counties under DASNY's Master BOCES Program Lease Revenue Bond Resolution. The Series 2021 bonds will be issued within 90 days of the maturity date of the Series 2011 bonds being refinanced with the proceeds of the Series 2021 bonds, which refunding will be a current refunding. The Series 2021 bonds are proposed to be sold to Roosevelt and Cross pursuant to a standard bond purchase agreement. If approved, the Series 2021 resolution authorizes bonds to finance or refinance the acquisition, renovation, and or equipping of certain facilities of SLL BOCES, which were originally financed by the Master BOCES Program Lease Revenue Bond, Series 11.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it would be helpful
for a minute
to do such a thing.
Excuse me, can you please mute your phone in the background?
On the call as well. So look, happy to have a follow-up. I just.
Could we
can
have
we
the
do it,
speakers mute
if we
their
can
phones?
do it tomorrow, as early as tomorrow, that'd be helpful because I think the deadline.
Thank you. I'll start that part again. If approved, the Series 2021 resolution authorizes bonds to finance or refinance the acquisition, renovation, and/or equipping of certain facilities of SLL BOCES, which were originally financed by the Master BOCES Program Lease Revenue Bonds, Series 2011, to fund the Debt Service Reserve Fund and/or pay the cost of acquiring a reserve fund facility with respect to such Series 2021 bonds. Pay the costs of a policy of municipal bond insurance, if any, with respect to such Series 2021 bonds, and pay all or a portion of the cost of issuance of such Series 2021 bonds. Under Section 1689 of the Dormitory Authority Act, DASNY is permitted to enter into the amended and restated agreement of lease and the amended and restated lease and agreement with the SLL BOCES with respect to the Series 2021 bonds and the specific facilities financed thereby, which amended and restated agreement of lease and the amended and restated lease and agreement amend and restate similar instruments initially entered into with respect to the Series 2011 bonds. Pursuant to the amended and restated agreement of lease, SLL BOCES will lease such facility to DASNY for nominal rent. DASNY will then lease such facility back to SLL BOCES pursuant to the amended and restated lease and agreement. Under the Act and under a memorandum of understanding to be entered into among DASNY, the New York State Education Department, and the Office of the State Comptroller, DASNY shall file a certificate annually with the Commissioner of Education stating all amounts due from the BOCES to DASNY under the amended and restated lease and agreement previously described. Upon receipt of a certification from the Commissioner of Education, the State Comptroller is required to deduct the amount certified by the Commissioner as due to DASNY from the state aid otherwise payable to the BOCES and pay that amount directly to DASNY. If the state aid is insufficient, the BOCES will remain obligated under the amended and restated lease and agreement to pay rent in an amount sufficient to meet debt service requirements of the Series 2021 bonds. In conclusion, the Series 2021 bonds will be special obligations of DASNY, payable solely out of the revenues and the monies and investments held in the funds and accounts established by the Series 2021 resolution. Other than any monies and investments held in the arbitrage rebate fund. Payment of the respective series of Series 2021 bonds is secured by the pledge and assignment made by the general resolution of the revenues, certain monies and investments, including a debt service reserve fund held under the general resolution and DASNY's rights thereto. If there are any questions by the members of DASNY, I'd be happy to answer them. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. It's Al Carney. Before we take any questions, if there are any, I want to apologize for having your presentation interrupted as it was. We'll try to keep that from happening again in the future. Certainly won't happen to you. How's that? Are there questions for Seth? No, it did. I think an apology was necessary. Questions for Seth and Steve?
And on that note, Mr. Chairman, I did mute Mr. Youssef, who has joined us and does have the ability to speak now. So I would just ask that he unmute himself, and just for our record, please identify yourself so we can note it in the transcript as required. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Did Mr. Youssef identify himself, sir?
Oh yeah, hi, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
You hear me?
Yes. Could you state your first and last name for the record, please? We are conducting this meeting, as you know, by Zoom. So we do need to just maintain a list of the participants in this public meeting.
Yes, I'd be more than happy to. My name is Yusuf Salama, and I am an associate director at Turner & Townsend.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Are there questions for Seth or Stephen? There being none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction as it was presented?
Sure, Al.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Second?
I'll second. It's Beryl again.
Beryl, thank you very much. Are there any objections to the motion as offered? Hearing none, are there any abstentions to the motion from the motion as offered? Hearing none, the motion is deemed passed unanimously and the transaction is approved. Thank you all very much. Mr. President, we are at tab 7, I think, which is your presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have quite a bit to cover and a few resolutions along the way. But first, I want to recognize that it is February. And for people like Jerry Romsky, who measure a life by in-person DASNY board meetings, this was our second to last in-person board meeting in 2020. And you'll recall last year, we celebrated Black History Month with a note, and I have something else for us today. On June 16th, 1961 in Albany, more than 1,000 people packed Wilborn Temple's pews that was crammed to the balcony and vestibules, sat on the floor, waited outside, waiting to hear a 32-year-old African-American preacher from Atlanta. One of those who arrived early for King's Friday night speech was 26-year-old Solomon Dees, one of 9 children raised on his family's farm in Alabama. I remember it was so jam-packed there was no place to put anyone else, said Dees, who became pastor of Wilborn Temple in 2007 after serving as a deacon. It was something to witness, I tell you, he said. Reverend King was a great orator, even though he was young and not even very well known outside of the South at that point. He had a drive and presence that was different from other preachers I'd heard, said Dees, who's now 80. He worries that the message of King is being forgotten by young generations. I talk to young people about civil rights movement, and it's all kind of foreign to them, he said. Dees recounted an incident in 1962 when his wife, Nora, was shot as she walked near her home on Clinton Avenue by a man who lived across the street. The bullet narrowly missed her vital organs, and she was not seriously injured. I wanted to shoot a Black person, the shooter said at his trial, in which he was found guilty and sentenced to prison. The Dees have a niece who works for DASNY, and that niece is Gisette Nelson.
That's terrific. Mr. President, thank you very much for reminding us of the importance of, well, of our history, as well as the importance of Black History Month. Appreciate you telling us the story. Appreciate the significance of the story. And I hope everybody else on this call recognizes the importance of this part of our history. That said, I'm done.
And yeah, by the way, one of our great teammates. So
there was a wonderful article in yesterday's Times on Rosa Parks, which is really very insightful. I recommend it to anybody who didn't have the ability to read it. So anyway,
Mr. President, I just want to chime in to say that Solomon Dees is my uncle as well. Gisette, his wife was Gisette's aunt, and he's my mother's brother.
Wow.
Well,
Albany
that might work better. That might work better. That's so fascinating.
Yep.
And also shows how small Albany is. So thanks so much.
It's my comment that Albany's very small. But Kimberly, thank you for letting us know that. Again, these relationships are important historically, and they're important going forward. And Mr. President, again, thank you for taking the time to tell us that story. It is one that I did not know. But I know it now.
Great. In my written report, we outlined the 2022 executive budget proposals. I will not read that to you, but I did want to highlight for just some additional information, one of the proposals that could, if passed, significantly impact DASNY's potential customer base. And that is the authority for DASNY to both issue bonds on behalf of, as well as provide construction services for not-for-profits and school districts throughout the state. And we believe that this would be significant for us. The addition to that would be that for not-for-profits, during the COVID period, we would also be able to help finance working capital for these entities. We have developed inside of DASNY 2 working groups, one that is looking at the implications and policy matters around the financing side, so that if we have people, or when we have people, not if, when we have people calling, we will know how to accept those calls, how to route those calls, what information to give, as we develop programs to be able to assist in that component. The second is the construction division. We put together a working group to look at who are targets for us that we may expand some of our business. The construction side of the legislation has a minimum of a $5 million capital project, which is still relatively small in the scheme of what DASNY completes. But we are working very diligently over the next 60 days to make sure that if and when this is passed, we are prepared. So we're very excited about this as an opportunity to expand our business and expand our authority. However, we're also cautious about what this expanded authority means if we don't get it right when people begin to ask us for programmatic details. So we're spending a lot of time on that. Any other questions on the budget or that specific topic?
Ruben, I did have one question. It's on the second full page of your presentation, and it is a budget question. First of all, I didn't know that ESD was actually the Urban Development Corporation. I didn't know that, and I gathered that that's its formal name. Thank you. The end of that paragraph speaks to the possibility of issuing up to $8 billion in short-term borrowings and up to $3 billion of credit facilities. Is this a second $11 billion proposal in addition to the one that we've already met?
That's an excellent question, Mr. Chairman. This is an extending of the first. So as you'll recall, we did a $3 billion credit facility. The state has not drawn on that credit facility. This allows us to either continue that facility or to re-up if we decide not to take it. We also, as you know, issued, as everyone knows, issued short-term notes. It is expected now that those notes will be paid off out of cash flow, but the Division of Budget wanted to maintain the flexibility given the uncertainty around federal programs to do that. So it is not an additional 11 billion. It is a continuation of the 11 billion of authority we had last time.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Does anybody else have questions on the budget issues? I'm sorry, on the budget matters. Hearing none, Mr. President, please continue.
Great, thank you. So next, this is always a fun one. We have our recognition of service resolutions. This time of year, we typically would be organizing an in-person celebration of retirements as well as years of service. Clearly, with the current environment, we won't do that in person this month. The chairman and I went back and forth on whether we should try some type of a Zoom presentation like we did for our holiday party. And the chairman was so correct. You retire once. We have holiday parties each year. And so we decided that instead of having a Zoom meeting, what we would do is the first time we are able to get back in person, whether that's in the office or in some type of an outdoor activity later this summer, we will do a recognition of service celebration in both Albany and New York. But in the meantime, we wanted to pass this resolution, and we will be sending each of the retirees a letter recognizing their service, a copy of the resolution, as well as a certificate. And so we're looking forward to that. We also, as we all know, Mike Cusack has moved on to another position, and we have a very nice resolution in the packet for Mike Cusack, who served as general counsel of DASNY for 8 years. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you to handle those two resolutions.
And I'll handle them in that order. The resolution of the Dormitory Authority recognizing with appreciation the service of the 2020 retirees. It's a very short resolution. I assume everybody's had a chance to read it. Are there any suggestions for revision? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve that resolution?
It's Joan. I make the motion.
Thank you, Joan. Is there a second?
I'll make it. It's Beryl.
Thank you very much, Beryl. Are there any objections to the motion as presented? Are there any abstentions from the vote for the motion as presented? Hearing none, the motion is deemed passed unanimously and that resolution is adopted. On to the resolution acknowledging with appreciation the service of Mike Cusack. As is my habit, I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from this well, actually more than two, from this resolution, because I believe that Mike Cusack's service to DASNY was exemplary in many respects, and I know how hard he worked in his job. Whereas Michael E. Cusack joined DASNY on March 4, 2013 as General Counsel in DASNY's Office of General Counsel, and whereas throughout his nearly 8-year tenure at DASNY, Mr. Cusack was a trusted advisor of DASNY's board, executive leadership, and staff, while being an invaluable resource to DASNY's clients and stakeholders. And whereas Mr. Cusack has provided invaluable legal advice with respect to the issuance of $59.4 billion of DASNY's bonds and more than $6.5 billion in construction expenditures on behalf of our clients. And whereas Mr. Cusack established new protocols within the construction division, which resulted in a significant reduction of grievances, investigations, and legal actions, substantially improving DASNY's construction litigation risk profile. Now, therefore, be it resolved that DASNY's board pauses to reflect and appreciate the dedication, commitment, leadership, integrity, and management skills of Mr. Cusack brought to DASNY during his tenure. And of course, we wish him all the best. Are there any proposed changes for this resolution? Hearing none, I have one, and I overlooked it, and I apologize to the staff. In the last whereas clause, in the last line, which begins fairness, equity, and inclusion in New York State contracting opportunities, there should be a full stop there, a period, and the and should be deleted. With that minor change, I would ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
It's Joan. I make the motion.
Thank you, Joan. Second?
I second.
Thank you very much, John. Are there any objections to the motion? Are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, the motion is passed unanimously and the resolution is adopted. Mr. President.
Great, thank you very much. Our next item of business, my report, is a project labor agreement from Western New York Children's Psychiatric Center. And Brendan, I apologize publicly for forgetting your last name, Wolf, will be presenting this. Brendan?
Thank you, Mr. President. For your consideration today is a resolution authorizing DASNY to include compliance with a project labor agreement as a requirement in the project bidding documents in connection with a project at the Western New York Children's Psychiatric Center in West Seneca. This project includes a new addition as well as renovations of the existing facility. It also includes a new secure outdoor recreation area. Now, you may recall at the October board meeting, a similar request was made of the board with respect to use of a PLA, project labor agreement, for a project at the Central New York Psychiatric Center. The PLA you see here today contains the same relevant provisions, including covered parties, MWBE and SDVOB goals and bring along rules, and dispute resolution procedures. Additionally, a PLA feasibility study was conducted to ensure compliance with the New York State labor law and to demonstrate that the use of a PLA is beneficial to the state's interests. I'm happy to answer any questions, but in the meantime, I know that DASNY and the Office of Mental Health are excited to get started on this project with the projection that DASNY will advertise for bidders in April of 2021. Thank you.
Question.
Thank you, Brendan.
I saw a reference to Wick's law in the board package. Does this affect compliance with Wick's law?
So to answer your question, yes, Mr. Gardner. The one of the benefits to entering into a PLA from DASNY's perspective is it allows us to essentially bypass Wick's law. As you know, Wick's law is a requirement that any projects above a certain threshold in an upstate New York would be $500,000. The specification packages, the trades have to be bid separately. So you have electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and general construction. Because we are entering into a PLA, Section 222 of the labor law in New York permits DASNY to advertise for one construction contract. That general contractor or prime contractor, who is the low bidder, will then bid out those trades separately. The benefit to DASNY obviously is that it cuts down on coordination issues. It puts the burden of coordinating this project and coordinating the trades solely on the prime contractor, and it kind of keeps DASNY out of that.
Are we in a unique position to take advantage of this exception to Wick's law?
So we're not in a unique. There are other state agencies and authorities who are in the same position that we're in, to answer your question.
Yeah.
I will say this though, most of DASNY's work actually operates within the confines of a project labor agreement. As you're aware, the majority of our work takes place downstate within the 5 boroughs. We do have, and I'm sure it was presented to the board, I know it was presented to the board last year, a PLA that we negotiated with the New York City BCTC, the Building and Construction Trades Council. That's a PLA that governs all projects within the 5 boroughs. This is upstate. We don't have that same latitude, so we have to go project by project.
Yeah.
Coming in.
I saw the long list of labor organizations on the contract. How did you manage that? That was impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I could take credit for that, but I can't. It really
take it anyway.
You're too gracious. The BC.
Take it. They'll blame you if it's not working. So. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I said take the credit. They'll blame you if it's not working.
That's true. That's true. Well, I'd rather deflect the blame onto the Building and Construction Trades Council. We worked with, and it was myself. I can't take all the credit. Steve Curro was very helpful in this regard. Michael Clay. We worked with the Western New York Building and Construction Trades Council, which is essentially a trades group who has the contacts and the relationships with the various labor unions in that jurisdiction. In this case, it's Western New York. So we negotiate the PLA with them. They then go back to each of the trades and say, review, and if you're amenable to this, please sign. They all signed. We didn't get any pushback from many of them. So
that's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah, it is. Great question, John. And by the way, Brendan, if you're going to call John Mr. Gardner, we're going to insist that he call you Mr. Wolf.
I'm happy to do that.
I'm not used to being called Mr. Wolf, but I do appreciate. So John from here on out, because I prefer to be called Brendan. So
all right, fair enough.
First name basis.
Are there any other questions for Brendan? Or for Steve, actually.
Is there any possibility or likelihood that this agreement would be announced publicly? Is this possibly going to be in the press?
I think it's unlikely that this ends up in the press. I suppose it's more likely that the project itself may end up in local media out in Western New York.
Yeah.
Whether the reporter or the media picks up on the fact that this is subject to a project labor agreement or even knows what that means is a different story. But I don't think that this has the same, to answer your question, I don't think that this has the same public interest that maybe the DASNY New York City PLA, which really controls billions of dollars of construction.
You never know. Is there a ballpark estimate, really a ballpark, of what sort of cost savings this labor agreement could bring us or bring the project?
I don't have a ballpark cost savings estimate, nor does I don't believe we did have a feasibility completed by Lero, who was one of our consultants.
Yeah.
I don't believe they identify a precise figure. But they did conclude that there will be a savings. The other benefit to entering into a PLA is because it standardizes all of the collective bargaining provisions that are subject to this particular project. it ensures that there are no labor stoppages. So again, tough to predict, simply because if there were a labor stoppage, the cost to DASNY, the cost to the Office of Mental Health, the cost to the state may be immeasurable.
Yeah.
Whereas now we have a guarantee that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I have occasionally read that Wick's Law costs every public project in New York State about a third more than it should.
That may be, and I've read there's, if you go online, and I've done this many times because it's my business, and just simply Google Wick's Law, New York, you can find countless articles that really advocate for on both sides of that debate. But I tend to fall in line with what you're suggesting, John.
Yeah.
Certainly to DASNY, this is having to comply with Wick's Law is a burden.
Yeah.
The trade contractors may argue that they're not privy to the same opportunities under PLA as they are under Wick's Law because they're not bidding directly. But ultimately, the work is there, whether it's they're holding the private contract or they're holding a significant subcontract.
And I'll say this again. I know everyone's heard me say it and they're sick of it, but it has always seemed to me that DASNY should have an exception from Wick's Law because we have so much internal control that we are able to prevent and identify the abuses that Wick's Law was intended to prevent and identify. And so bringing an agency like DASNY into the picture with all of its internal controls is something that I think we should be advertising. I think to me, and you know, this is, I don't want to belabor this, but this is the kind of agreement that I would think we can brag about. You know, when you bring DASNY to the table, we can do things like this. We can save the public money. We can prevent work stoppages. We can have other benefits like that. And go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then I think that the fact that we are, that I'm here before the board for the second time in I think 4 months with one of these project specific PLAs says something to the, you know, it's a testament to what we are doing, in particular what we're doing upstate. And perhaps the day may come when you'll see your item added to a legislative agenda.
Yeah.
But certainly it's worth considering.
And I'll make one last comment. When the project is underway and things are happening, I would love to see us do a press release talking about our involvement in it and our unique agreement in connection with this project. And if we do anything like that, please give Janice and I a heads up because we'll get a phone call. And I would love to have a couple of bullet points to, you know, to throw into that conversation about, you know, what this does for the project, the cooperation of the unions, and the fact that, you know, when you bring DASNY into a project, you get this kind of, you know, this kind of treatment.
So I
Thanks,
agree
John.
with
That's
you,
really
and
helpful. Thank you, Brendan. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll make sure you're prepared, John.
Thank you.
There is a resolution. It is immediately behind the Solomon Wolf memorandum, immediately in front of the draft MOU. Hope you've had a chance to take a look at it because I'm about to ask whether or not there are any changes recommended for it. Hearing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve it.
I so moved.
Thank you very much. I hoped you would actually. Is there a second?
I'll second this, Beryl.
Beryl, thank you very much. Wellington, good to see you on the line.
Yeah, I just finished the other meeting, so I apologize for the late joining.
No harm, no foul. Thank you for joining us. Are there any objections to the motion as offered? Hearing none, are there any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is deemed accepted unanimously, passed unanimously, and the resolution is passed. Mr. President.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item for your consideration is in addition to our outside counsel list for alternative delivery services. Brendan will give this presentation, but just a quick background. Paul Koopman has been working for quite some time on putting together a panel of professionals that can help us think about things like energy savings contracts, P3 and others. And so as part of that procurement, we procured outside counsel. And as is our standard, we have a resolution to add some additional folks to outside counsel. So Brendan?
Thank you, Mr. President. For your consideration today is a resolution approving the selection of 9 law firms to be impaneled by DASNY and potentially be retained as counsel with respect to alternative project delivery services. In early October of 2020, DASNY's procurement department issued a request for proposals from various firms, including law firms, to provide legal representation on the subject of alternative project delivery. DASNY is specifically looking for legal advice involving the development of certain public-private partnership projects. As DASNY looks to its future, we are eager to move forward on a path that will allow DASNY to pursue such projects. Establishing this legal panel will assist in furthering that objective. 9 law firms submitted proposals to DASNY, and all 9 firms demonstrated the expertise associated with this complex subject matter. DASNY's board approved the establishment of an alternative delivery panel law firm several years ago, back in 2016. This impanelment of 9 law firms, if approved, would supersede the previous impanelment. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Are there questions for
Mr. When you do the RFP, I mean, there are a lot of law firms in New York State. How does a law firm get on the list just to receive the RFP?
So law firms who may be interested in this kind of work, they would find these in the contract reporter. We also advertise on the DASNY website, and there's an advertisement, and the advertisement contains a link to the actual RFP. So that's essentially how that would work. We did get a relatively robust response.
Yeah.
So presumably the law firms, or many of the law firms anyway, that we were targeting were reviewing either the contract reporter on a regular basis, or less likely DASNY's website.
So it's not like an email blast. The law firms themselves have to be paying attention and respond.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's consistent with all of our procurement. Mr. Chairman?
Sir, are there any other questions for Brendan? Hearing none, the resolution appears immediately behind that memorandum from Brendan and Ricardo. You've had a chance to take a look at it. I'm sorry, may I have a motion, please, to approve it?
So moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second it.
Thank you very much, Wellington. Is there any objection to the resolution to the motion as presented? Are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, the motion is passed unanimously and the resolution is adopted. Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Give me a second logistically. I'm going to ask Deb Fraser to share her screen with everyone for a brief presentation. I will narrate and she will use the clicker. So Deb. We have pictures. We have pictures. So we've talked about 28 Liberty a lot. Can't wait to get there. And we're just pleased to say that it is move-in ready. We have a couple of minor technical points we're putting together. And quite frankly, if we needed to be in there, we could be there tomorrow. Let's go to the first slide, Deb. So this is the outside of 28 Liberty and William Street. So you can kind of see what the plaza looks like, which would be nice to have this outdoor plaza for everyone to enjoy. And so we're very much looking forward to that area. Next slide. And now some interior shots with the furniture in. So this is the kitchenette lounge area. You know, you see we have some nice places where people can sit and eat their lunch looking out at the view, as well as some high tops and some low tops where you can enjoy lunch. We've also made it so that these tables and chairs can all be moved around and separated and such. So we think that'll be very functional. So we're very happy about this space. Next. This is just an example of a cubicle. You know, one of the upgrades is this back panel where you can have your telephone and other things, so your cubicle's not as pulled together. And then in the front, you can see on the left a locker, so people can have their personal items locked in the locker that also will hold a coat and other things. Next slide. We've created a couple of spaces where people can either talk together, have some privacy pods, or when board members come and want to have a place to sit casually, they can do that. Also a place for, you know, breaks and other things. These pods are also movable, but a nice feature for our teammates that we did not have in our old space. Next.
Mr. President, do we know yet
Sir.
whether cell phone service in that area is good?
We are working through that. We know the cell phone service in the area is fine. On the 55th floor, we want to make sure it's fully functional, so we may put a couple of boosters in there if we need to.
Okay, thank you.
This is just an example of the meeting spaces. Again, we have the rolling and flexibility to move around. We have good boards. Not every meeting space has an electronic board. This one does not, but we do have some electronic boards as well, so that, you know, designers and others can collaborate with folks. And you can look, if you just look out the view, you see Lady Liberty there waiting to greet us when we get to the office.
And I'm guessing that all the meeting space does not have that view either.
Not all of it. Next slide. This is my office. I've got great views, clearly. Nice furniture set up with the ability to meet here. I also have a small conference room outside of my office for you know, meetings with staff members and such. We're very pleased about that. And then the final slide, Deb, is where we'll be meeting when we get back. This is the boardroom.
All right.
Lady Liberty does welcome the board members. So you're very pleased with how the space came out. It looks very different with furniture in it. This boardroom also has a breakout room kind of through that door there, if you will. So if a board member needs to take a private call or something, they can just slip out and make that call there and come back in without disturbing the rest of the board. And then on the other end of the table that you cannot see is the full electronic package with the big screen, so that we can video conference people in from Albany and other places, or do presentations on the screen. And we've got state-of-the-art technology on that end of the room as well. We're excited about this. The chairs are ergonomic, so all of us can be comfortable. And as you can tell, the table pulls apart so we can move around, have multiple meetings in here, and you know, different configurations depending on what we're utilizing the space for. So we just want to give you just a quick update on what's going on at 28 Liberty, and give you some, I started to use a term that I shouldn't say on recording. Give you an eye view, if you will, of what it looked like. So thank you,
Mr.
Deb.
President, it's
Yes,
Al.
sir.
It's very beautiful. I mean, I think we've done a terrific job of both building out and then furnishing. And it looks very functional.
Yeah, we are extremely excited about it.
One question, and I may have asked you this already, but if I did, I don't remember the answer. Will there be areas for hand sanitizing, you know, the infrared temperature thermometers, but specific areas that are in effect labeled as that?
Well, we'll have hand sanitizing stations throughout the floor, as we would normally. Okay. And then what we will do is, depending on what the protocol is at the time we get in this office, right now you can get in the office two ways, but we'll set it up so you have to come through the reception area, you know, in the morning to be checked. We'll make sure we're fully functional. And also, just for the board's awareness, as you know, we now have 25% of our employees at any time that could go into the Albany office, and we'll continue to increase that. we have made the decision that for the New York City office, until we're all ready to go in and we have the computer support people and the people there to help people move boxes around and such, that we will hold off on moving into that building and into that space until we feel better about the density level. However, we will open it up sometime, probably the next 3 to 4 weeks, for people like Steve Curl and others who come in from Albany and just need a place to sit and work between meetings and other things. So we will have some DASNY employees coming in and out of the building, but we won't have it fully functional until we're ready to all get back.
Deb Fasser, it's Al Carney. We all know who organized this presentation. It was terrific. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Group effort, though.
I'm sure.
Yeah, group effort. I kept asking them out when it was done. That was my contribution. No, Debbie did a great job. We really appreciate that. Thanks so much. I'm now going to turn it over to Kim Ellis for a financial report. Kim.
Thank you, Ruben. Good morning, board members, Mr. Chair. As highlighted in the standing financial report, we received $1.3 million in financing fees through December. The percentage of direct hours charged to our public client programs is slightly up at 94.1% against a budget of 92.2%, and our operating expenses are approximately $4.4 million below budget, primarily driven by personnel costs and ongoing efforts to keep overall expenses down. In accordance with the Public Authorities Accountability Act of 2005 and 2009, the fiscal year 21-22 proposed budget and financial plan was posted on our website and the Public Authorities Reporting Information System on December 30th, 90 days in advance of the beginning of the fiscal year, with copies sent to all members. Given the uncertainties of the state's financial plan and its impact on DASNY's clients, we are continuing to go through the state's recently released proposed budget, determine if it requires any adjustments to the assumptions that were made in developing DASNY's budget and financial plan. We will have a formal presentation of the proposed operating budget at the March 3rd board meeting, with anticipation of formal adoption at the March 31st meeting. Lastly, the year-end financial statement audit is underway. KPMG has begun interim test work this week. That concludes my report.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Ellis. Any questions?
Kimberly, would you remind us of the firm that will be working with KPMG?
Yes, it is. It escapes me right now.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But there is a firm that will
they're working with two firms. It's the same Long Island financial firm that they worked with last year, in addition to another minority firm that was added this year.
Terrific. Thank you, Kimberly.
We're trying out. We're trying out options, Al.
Yes, we have an M and a W on this audit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good point, John. Thank you. Mr. President.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to Portia Lee and Matt Bergen to give us an update on public finance. Portia and Matt.
Great. Thank you, Ruben. So brief market update. Total new issue supply is currently about $25.3 billion year to date. That's 18.5% lower compared to supply at this time last year. This week, total supply is expected at $7.9 billion. Tax-exempt bond yields were flat on Tuesday. The 10-year AAA MMD yield remained at a 0.73%, while the 30-year remained at a 1.38%. U.S. government bond yields increased, with both the 10-year and the 30-year Treasury increasing by 3 basis points to 1.12% and 1.87% respectively. Municipal bond funds reported inflows for the week ending January 27th, after reporting inflows previously. Since the December board meeting, the 1-year MMD rate decreased 4 basis points, the 10-year increased by 2 basis points, and the 30-year decreased by 2 basis points. And the 10 and 30-year Treasury have increased 20 basis points and 21 basis points respectively since that meeting. Overall, since the new year, rates have been low and there hasn't been a lot of supply. So it's been a very good time to be an issuer in the market. So since the last board meeting, we priced and closed the St. Joseph's College financing, and the FIT transaction is closing today. These deals were very well received in the market, and I will turn it over to Matt to discuss these two pricings in more detail. Matt?
Thank you, Portia. I wanted to talk about the two transactions we brought to market recently. The first was the St. Joseph's College. It was a new money tax exempt financing. The loan was about $15.6 million, and this was brought to market on January 12th. This credit was very well received by the market. It was rated BBB-, and the security features included a pledge of revenues and a mortgage, and there was strong investor demand even without a debt service reserve fund. The pricing included maturities from 2021 to 2030, as well as maturities in 2035, 2040, and 2051. And, you know, when we work with the underwriters on these transactions, we see the orders come in real time. And again, as Portia was saying, this transaction was very well received from the market. The maturities that I mentioned, the 2021 to 2030, the 35, the 40, and the 2051 maturity were oversubscribed between 3 and 12 times. And when we talk to the underwriters, you know, they talk about these oversubscriptions and how they're going to adjust the yields. And so in certain instances, you know, let's just say there was maturity had $1 million of bonds. They had 5 times as many orders as there were bonds, and they were able to decrease yields in certain situations commensurate with that demand. So if they were 5 times over, they would decrease the yield by 5 basis points. It doesn't always work like that, but sometimes it does. And they refer to these decreases as bumps. So they'll say we were 5 times over and we're going to bump the yield by 5 basis points. Again, that means there was 5 times as many orders as there were bonds, and they were able to decrease the yield in that maturity by 5 basis points. With the oversubscriptions and the adjustments, the true interest cost for this loan ended up being a 3.9%, and the college was very pleased with the outcome. The second transaction we brought to market was different in that the FIT Student Housing Corporation was an insured transaction by Assured Guarantee. This had a AA rating from S&P, and this was a taxable transaction. With the execution of a taxable loan, it's a little different than a tax-exempt loan. The underwriter went out with what they call indications of interest. And with the oversubscriptions, there were four maturities in this loan, 2035, 36, 37, and 38. With the oversubscription, they were able to decrease yields by 15 basis points in each of those maturities from where they first went out. So the execution of the pricing was very successful. And in this instance, the true interest cost, or TIC, was a 3.1%. And just to give a little more color, the St. Joseph's College transaction had a total of 14 investors, and the FIT Student Housing Corporation had a total of 8 investors. But again, with these oversubscriptions, the underwriter was able to decrease the yields, and ultimately this benefited both St. Joseph's College and the FIT Student Housing Corporation. And I'll take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Portia. Any questions for Matt or Portia about public finance?
And Ruben, if I might, I'll just quickly touch on the credit enhancement report and the bond sale summaries. So included in your board materials under additional materials is the annual credit enhancement report for the not-for-profit portfolio. You'll see on the first page, the top pie charts show that the amount of fixed rate debt versus variable rate debt for the not-for-profit portfolio. There are no surprises here. The percentage of fixed rate debt is growing year over year, while the variable rate portfolio is declining. The pie charts at the bottom of the page show outstanding debt by type of credit enhancement. Again, no surprises. The percentage of unenhanced debt has grown since last year, and the debt with credit enhancement has declined. The one thing I would note is that the percentage of debt with other enhancement has grown due to the recent Maimonides financing that was FHA insured. On page 2, you can see the type of credit enhancement and the specific providers for the variable rate portfolio for not-for-profit institutions. The following 2 pages show the same information in table format, and the last page shows the renewal dates for letters of credit in connection with private clients for the next several years. Lastly, also included in the board materials are a package of 5 bond sale summaries, which include metrics.
I think is there.
I would note that we generally met our days to market benchmark, although there was one deal that was delayed because of COVID. And that's my report.
Would you excuse me for a second? Jerry, you haven't muted your phone. Would you do that?
So that concluded my report. Thank you.
Portia and Matt, thank you. I just want to let the board know I had the opportunity to talk to Dr. Brown yesterday at FIT, and she was very pleased with the transaction. It's very important for them to get this relief during this difficult financial time, and also very complimentary of the team. DASNY and the rest of the working group work very well together. And so another happy client from DASNY, and I appreciate the public finance team working on that. So thank you so much, Portia, Matt, and the rest of your team.
Thank you.
And congratulations to all of you. What a great report. Appreciate it.
That segues into Steve Curl's report. Unfortunately, Steve Curl had a very important meeting this morning. We've run into that, so he is not on the phone, but he has given me his report to give. So I will give that to you. These are his words for the most part. But Paul Koopman, Brendan Wolf, and I can answer any questions about this. So in construction, we got some good news from Budget Bulletin B1223 on CUNY. DASNY received notification that the Department of Budgets has approved over 40 DASNY managed CUNY projects valued over $300 million. So that is great. A couple caveats. A couple of these are community college projects, which we know also need New York City OMB approval. And so we're waiting for those to come in. The project locations include 7 projects at Lehman College, 6 at Bronx College, 4 at Brooklyn College, City College 3, Baruch's, CUNY Law, Hunter, and others. So very happy to kind of get some of those projects moving in the right direction. We also received notification on OPWDD that DASNY's received DOB approval for 59 DASNY managed projects valued over $18 million in the recent round of the project approvals. We will begin working immediately on moving these projects forward. So we're looking forward to that. They include locations in Brooklyn, Broome County, Capital District, Central New York Finger Lake District, Hudson Valley, Long Island, Metro New York, and Staten Island. Because of COVID and trying to get all of the regulations in place, OPWDD has been very slow for us. So this is really good news to see that come out. On OMH, we received notification recently that DOB approved 11 DASNY managed projects valued at nearly $18 million. DASNY will begin working immediately on these projects as well. They include Hudson River, Mid-Hudson Valley, Rockland, Pilgrim, Sagamore, and others. So we did get some good news this week last week actually, from the Division of Budget, and some of these projects that we were concerned about are moving forward rapidly. So we're very pleased with that. On Moynihan Station, DASNY issued a temporary approval for occupancy on December 31st for the Moynihan Station Train Hall. The push to complete this TIO was a collective effort by the project's contractors, consultants, owners group, and DASNY. But Keith LaPlante, Rick Tillman, and Steve Curro did yeoman's effort on just organizing and getting this TIO ready. And we have some people on the ground, Bill Budanich and Raphael, I can't remember his last name, who literally were there 18 hours a day at the end to make sure that as work was being complete, we were there to do the approvals. And it was about 6:30 on December 31st, we issued this TAO. So that team on the construction side, on the permitting side, I've told them a million times, I'll tell them a million times more, but for the board, They did a fantastic job on getting this done in very difficult circumstances to meet that deadline. On the less than good news front, the Department of Health Life Sciences Lab building funding has been omitted from the proposed 21-22 budget. We're waiting on direction and guidance from DOB about the project's future. We are hearing that there are some, there's still some work to be done there, and they're looking at different options, but it will not be in the 21-22 budget. On Javits Convention Center, on the expansion, we've ramped up our communication with the owners group. They're looking for a TOA on, or TAO, excuse me, on May 5th of 2021. And so we're working to make sure we can help them get that completed. There are a lot of hurdles to overcome to get there. However, DASNY is fully engaged. We're meeting with them on a weekly basis. We have people down there. And we're also working with the owners group to make sure that actually gets done. So, obviously the construction has to be completed before we can permit it. But like Moynihan Station, we are on site and ready to go. One of our newer clients, West Point Service Academy, we are currently managing 2 bridge rehab replacement projects through the design phase. And we're in discussion with West Point now on advancing and managing these projects through the construction phase. West Point has engaged us also to manage renovation of the campus museum and replacement of a campus retaining wall through design. We are working now to get comfortable with the construction contracting terms that West Point is requiring. And we hope that this is just the beginning of good work at West Point in the future. And so we're very excited about this as a new potential client. And then we've talked for quite some time about PM Web, which is our new construction management software. We are getting close to implementation. We still have an April 1st of this year live date for going live on that. We feel like we are getting in good shape now. We've configured the project setup, budget, funding, and some of the project management non-transactional functions thus far. We're working on commitments, change orders, and payments. And we're doing a lot of work with our internal staff. And again, shout out to our information services group. They have really worked hand in hand with the construction group to help with this implementation. And we'll then begin migrating data over probably in early May for various projects that are ongoing. So we're very excited about getting that project up and running. Been around for a minute, so we're looking forward to that. That concludes Mr. Curro's construction report. If anyone has any questions, I am happy to have Paul Koopman answer them. Any questions? Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate everybody's attendance and listening to this long presence report. We got some good work done. We appreciate the resolutions being passed and look forward to working. Again, our next meeting is March 3rd. We have 2 meetings in March. So the March 3rd board meeting, we will have a presentation in more detail on the budget and any implications from the state's overall budget, with requesting your approval at the March 31st board meeting. That concludes my report.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And thank you to all of the staff folk who presented today and to all the people who supported those presentations. Thank you all very much. Are there any questions from the members for any of the staff or even each other? Hearing none, is there any other business to come before this meeting? There being none, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn the meeting? Thank you, Wellington. Is there a second?
Second.
Well, one of you moved it, the other seconded it. We'll let
we had 8 seconds.
Right. Right. Is there any objection to the adjournment? Is anybody abstaining from the vote? Hearing nothing, the motion passes and the meeting is adjourned. Mr. President, thank you again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, staff. Good job.
Thank you. Good
Thank you,
seeing
everybody.
you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for everybody and stay safe.
You too.
John, what's the temperature up there today?
Oh, I think it's about 25.
Oh, it's hot.
It's warm.